Welcome everyone to the Solo to Entrepreneur Show. You are with me, Lorraine Chai, your host. Today I have Xavier Crow, and he comes from the world of illusionist or mentalism. And the concept of mentalism, when he introduced himself as being the mentalist, was I've always remembered watching the show The Mentalist. If you guys out there who are my age group would watch that. I know some of you are younger, shows my age. But anyway, welcome, Xavier.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now, Xavier, when you introduce yourself to people, how would you introduce yourself? Like, what's the quickest way of introducing yourself?
Usually I tell people I'm a penguin valet, which means I pick up penguins at the zoo when they fall over. But that's just usually to get them to relax. So I used to call myself a magician, but I didn't like the box that I sat in. When I said magician, people had a stigma about it, and they expected me to do things a certain way or be a certain way, and I had to break that every single time I said it. But over the years, I've started calling myself a mentalist because, firstly, people don't know what that is yet. So they keep their judgments out of the way. And it's easy enough for me to say, well, let me show you something, or let me show you what I do, rather than let me tell you what I do. And so mentalist is how I go by at the moment, or psychological illusionist, but that name.
Psychological sounds very scary. It's like, ooh.
Yeah, there's a little bit of stress when you hear the word psychological. We're like, get out of my head. So
exactly, like stay away. I don't want you to read me.
Don't look in my eyes.
Let me wear my shades.
Exactly. That help.
Yeah, so that's why I thought I'll like you would be able to introduce yourself better than anyone else would, right? And the thing is, you've seen and you've heard how people respond in terms of the labeling, and I do understand, as you said, like the concept of magician versus illusionist or mentalist is completely different. It depends on who the person you're communicating with. Now, how did you get into this whole world of illusions and mentalism, as they say?
Yeah, that's an interesting story. I think every kid loved magic at some point in their life, at least for a moment, and if they didn't love it, they were intrigued by it. And as a kid, I was no different. And when I was very young, I watched magic shows on television with my parents, or I saw other kids do card tricks, and it intrigued the hell out of me. So instead of asking questions like, how did you do that, which most people ask after a magic trick, I was always, how can I do that? How can I do that? Can you show me how to do it? I think it came down to me being a young kid that couldn't communicate, really wanted the attention of the adults. And I found that when I was doing something interesting, I was receiving this love in the form of attention. So magic had two really strong reasons to be in my life. And one of them was to be able to communicate to people that I cared about, and the other one was to do something really amazing and incredible. So I think I was about 3 or 4 years old when I first remember trying to do a magic trick to my friends in the schoolyard. So
now, what did your parents say when you said you were going to be a magician or a mentalist?
That didn't come till much later. The first response from my dad, who's a very, very savvy businessman, was, you should be studying. Why are you doing that with the cards, or why are your grades getting lower?
How are you going to make money here? It's all about your future.
That's right. And after years, my mom bought me some magic books, and I started practicing. And after some time, instead of my dad saying that, when I wanted to show him a trick, it got to a point where he'd have friends over, and he's like, come, show them something that you learned. So he slowly started opening up, and when I started doing this full time at the age of about 23, that was it.
Mom's always the best, isn't it? Moms are the ones that encourages you, isn't it?
She got my back. She bought me all the magic books, and supported me, and she was really easy to entertain. So she gave me the confidence boost I needed. My brother would sit there in his room and get annoyed at me trying to show him a trick every 5 seconds, even though I hadn't finished learning it yet. So he saw the worst version of everything I do, poor guy. And when I showed the tricks to Dad, it was like, if I can get it past this guy, I can show it to an audience. And so the aim was always to fool my dad, or at least get him to say, do it again.
Now, why in the world do I have you here? The questions we'll be asking is like, what the heck do you have an illusionist or a mentalist here? Now, the reason why we have this is because there's certain tricks that I've seen you do. So I've known you quite a while now. not very long, but quite a while now. And the thing is, there's certain tricks that you've used that could be incorporated in any aspect of life, be it personal or professional. And what I saw was the concept of how you not. We don't use the word manipulate, or rather convince someone, change the way that they see things in regards to the way that you want them to see things, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. The word manipulation scares people. I use it a lot. I do manipulate people. I manipulate words and I manipulate perspective. And, the word manipulation, I mean, anything has a positive and negative polarity. And manipulation, it usually tends to come across negative, but manipulation is something we're all doing all the time. A child cries, it gets food. That's a form of manipulation. So we've been learning manipulation for a long time. The difference is I use it for entertainment purposes, and I understand language in a certain way that helps me manipulate thoughts and processes so that I can achieve a miracle for people, especially just in their minds.
So now explain to us what mentalism is.
Mentalism is the idea of using language and understanding the way people approach information and delivering it in such a way that outcomes can be either guessed, predicted, or influenced. So if I was to say to you, for example, I want you to think in a moment of a geometric shape, like a square, but not a square. Okay, so get a shape in your mind, simple shape. Have you got one?
Mm-hmm.
And inside put another shape, a simple shape, a different one. Okay, so you have two simple shapes in mind, and there could have been a range of different things you would have chosen. Tell me the two shapes that you thought of.
So I don't know the name of it, but it's the one that has 5 sides.
Like a pentagon.
I'm really bad with those names. Yes.
Okay.
And then
what did you put?
And then a circle inside.
A pentagon with a circle inside.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you have information coming at you, the first thing you do is you go back to your memories, and then you go to see what suits the information that's come to you. Now, when I said to you, I want you to think of a simple shape, right? I drew the pentagon here in front of me. And then I said, put another one inside it. And I just did a little circle, but I just did it here underneath my eyes. So your unconscious mind saw the shape. And then again, you saw the other shape. And so you said them seemingly naturally, as if it was your decision. But
so I did see that shape you were doing.
That's right. Yeah, you'll see it in an unconscious level.
But I was also wondering what kind of shape were you trying to convince me otherwise, but I didn't quite get that shape.
That's right. You'll find that it depends on the connection with the person, the kind of person that you're sitting in front of, and what kind of relationship you have. If someone is resisting or very skeptical, it's my job to see that first and try and break down that level of skepticism before I go ahead and try and do something like influence. If we have a good rapport and if we're in a good connection, if we're live, it's even better. And once I have that level of connection, there are certain things that we can expect as humans for people to say based on how humans think. So if I was to say to you, imagine yourself walking through a house, okay, and you can see all the different things in there. There's the kitchen, the living room, the lounge room, and you go into the living room and you see a piece of furniture. What do you see?
Sofa.
A sofa, exactly. So what I know for a fact is that the top 2 choices that anyone would say if I say, look at a piece of furniture in your mind, is sofa, and very close second is a chair. Okay.
Right.
We know there's thousands of pieces of furniture in the world, but there are things that most people will generally go for. Now, I have a very vast knowledge of all these typical items in my mind. So sometimes it'll hit and sometimes it'll miss. Now, I'll give you an example because I want to be straightforward with the people that are listening. I had a picture here of a chair, and I was banking on the idea you may have said chair, right? So had you done that, I would have turned this around and said, see, I knew you were going to say chair. You didn't. You went for a different option, which was equally as possible, which was sofa. Now, if I do this experiment with you, and I know that you're thinking a little bit differently to the regular human, which you are, then I'll change it for the future. I might use more prompts, or I might make an action. Like imagine a piece of furniture, and I might give you the piece.
But that is now that you know me
That's right.
and you've read me more.
There's a lot of figuring out that has to happen as well, and the idea is to do that as fast as possible.
Yeah. So in terms of psychological, I hate that word, psychological behavior of a entrepreneur or business person, what kind of common patterns or behavioral patterns have you noticed for like comparing between a successful one and someone that's just figuring it out?
I heard a phrase one time that said, how you do anything is how you do everything. And I think what that means is your approach to things is congruent across your entire life. So when it comes to entrepreneurs, they have mental processes that present in their day-to-day life. Those mental processes are also present in their business life. So if you're the sort of person that has been requested to do a task, and you write it down, and the very next moment you're free, you start that task and you complete it, that's how you're going to react in the world. If you're the sort of person that someone says, hey, can you do this for me? And you say, yes, no problem, and you don't write it down and you don't act upon it, then probably you're doing that in your business life as well. And so the people that are doing well as entrepreneurs are also have things tidy in other areas of their life. So there are a few things that cross over, especially when it comes to people that are sharp in business. They usually get things done. They complete tasks. I found busy people get more things done as well because they have this flow of having things to do. If you give a task to a lazy person, they'll find plenty of time not to do it. And if you give a task to a business person or a busy person, they'll find time to fit it in. That's the difference.
Okay, so now in regards to a successful entrepreneur, how would you suggest for them to encourage, right? Not manipulate, encourage their employees to work the way that they want?
Got it. So how I would do it if I was to approach someone, once upon a time I learned these techniques, and I was reading books on body language and psychology, etc., because I thought it would be really exciting and really interesting to figure out if people were lying to me. I was somehow paranoid that everyone was lying. Turns out the more I read about it, the more I thought people were lying, because then I could see signs of it everywhere. But through that, what I learned was that when you genuinely care about another, and when you listen to them from a place of understanding or attempting to understand, the person feels heard. And when a person feels heard, they build a sense of connection to you. So when we try to force people to do what we want, like I was trying to force myself to see how people were lying to me or expected them to do a certain thing, all I could see was that thing. If you're in business and you want to influence people, especially to do something, the idea is to first listen to them, come from a place of understanding, attempt to use their language back to them as best as possible. If someone keeps saying, I feel that's not a good idea, or I don't feel that's right for me, you can hear that they receive language in the form of kinesthetic, in the form of feelings. So I would say to you, I would like this done and this done. How do you feel about that? So I'll use their language back to them. If it's a person that says, that sounds like a good idea, I'll say, hey, listen to this. I have this idea and this idea. How does that sound to you?
The whole concept of negotiation and sales, it comes with understanding or being able to read body language as well as picking up words and emotions and feelings, right? Because in that whole concept of negotiation or sales, we have this whole concept of right brainers, understanding the right brainers versus the left brainers in order to pitch them or in order to communicate with them. Now, in regards to body language, as a mentalist, how important is it for business owners, you reckon?
I think body language should be a curriculum in primary school. I think the understanding of subtle facial features or body positioning and things like that has so many applicable uses in life. Let's say I'm talking to you and I'm posing a suggestion. Before you resist or before you reject my suggestion, I've already seen on your body or on your face the way you've calculated my information, right? So I'll give you an example. most people, when they think of body language, they think this is closed body language. That's the first thing. They're like, oh, you folded your arms, you've got closed body language. So with body language, what your aim is to do is to gather information together. So if you're talking to me and I'm like, nodding away, and then I'm like, I'm just getting comfortable. That's me getting comfortable. If you say something specific, like, what do you think of, John over there? And I'd be like, oh, John. So now what I've done is I've crossed my arms as soon as you mention the name John. I've lifted
and
my
tensed,
my neck. So I've got some, the crossing the arms is like, I may not want to talk about this, or this is personal. The closing of the shoulders to protect the neck is almost like, maybe John is a threat of some description, or maybe there's something extra there. So there's a lot of information that comes in the body language, but you've got to read it based on the context of the conversation and the chunking, or the combination of information. I cross my arms and lean back and look away, maybe touch my face. There's a whole bunch of stuff there that also all of a sudden makes it, he's not being comfortable. He is either being deceptive, or he's being really defensive. And so when it comes to body language, the more you know about it, the better you can communicate. And I think communication is key in every aspect of life, and business specifically.
So this is not something that we can learn overnight, and this is not something you can just read and suddenly be, experience on, isn't it? It's something that you have to practice on, isn't it? I wished.
Yeah. Look, I'm a lifelong student. There's no day that I don't learn something, and I thrive on learning things. I mean, if I'm to be really direct, sometimes the acquisition of information is a how do I say, a procrastination tool. I'll just learn a little bit more before I go ahead and try it. And so that's one sticking point. But with something like body language, it's forever. It's a journey that you've got to go through. There's some really great books on body language. I have a couple I could recommend. Reading those books and then just looking at people in their day-to-day life.
So give us a couple of titles.
Yeah, one is called What Everybody Is Saying. And it's everybody. The word is split. Which I think is a clever title. Everybody is saying. Yeah, and it's Joe Navarro. He's an ex-CIA detective and interrogator, I believe. And his job was to understand people better than they understood themselves and negotiate in terrorist situations. And so he's got some live action stories in the book, and it's very easy to digest. It's real world examples of body language in action, and descriptions of what's happening and how it's happening. And the other one was by an Australian named Alan Pease, Alan and Barbara Pease, Pease.
Pease.
Yeah, and it's the definitive book of body language. I've read that maybe 2 or 3 times, and every time I find something new. So if you read those 2 books and act upon the things in those books, it won't take too long before you start seeing body language examples in people. And if people are at home want to practice reading body language, the best thing is read the book and then pay attention to yourself rather than other people. So when I started researching how to detect lies in people, what started happening was I started recognizing all of the key responses my body gave when I lied. And even though other people hadn't read the information, I thought everyone could see me lying. So it made me really scared to lie.
Okay. All right. Give like how
this or when I do this.
Yeah. So how would you pick someone that is a liar? Like, let's say we want to collaborate with another business person, right? So how would you, what kind of tips would you give us in terms of what to pick out for a liar?
Yeah. So in a business situation, it may not be a casual setting. You may not be able to request the same things of a person unless you have a big, strong rapport with them. So when it comes to detecting liars in business, some people can be really good at it, so it may be difficult. One thing to do is ask someone for a sequence of events or a sequence of happenings, and then you ask them to do it backwards. So you might tell me this information, this one. I'm like, sorry, what was the one before that? And if you ask someone to repeat a lie backwards, they've practiced it forwards. So it's a script. And because the script has been practiced this way, the brain hasn't had any time to understand the entirety of the script in forwards and reverse. If I went to the shops and then went to visit my father and then went to go and play with the dog, that happened. So I can remember it backwards. But if I'm making it up, going backwards is going to be very difficult because now I'm trying to relive a story in reverse.
Okay, I hate doing this for a few seconds, but it's making me look like as if I'm a Maori, a Maori warrior here. The sun just changed direction. So let's see if that works. Yes, I'm not a Maori warrior anymore. Darn it, like the sun. Okay, cool. Now, for me, the way that I notice liars, and that's I'm gonna move again. So, and that's in the experience that I have is one of the lies that I've caught was where I asked the same question differently. So I asked the same question differently, and the story that comes back is always contradicting to the previous way that they replied or responded. That got me to question a lot of things. So that's how, I just want to make sure that they know what they're saying is genuine. What they're offering is something that they truly want to do, and that's how I look at it. So
it's a good one. And I also use that. I think it's a great technique. Rephrasing a question is very good, especially if the answer is supposed to be the same. That's a good one. Another thing to add to that would be relive. No, that's not the word. Give the information back, deliver the information back to the listener, and change a part of the information. So
to see if they would correct you or something.
If they'll correct it and to see how far they would go in correcting it. So, you can ask them a question about something that happened. If you know something happened, you can, let's say we're going to go into a different example to give you the idea. Let's say I have a child, and they come to me and they said they went to go out with their family and with their friends. They went to the cinema. After the cinema, they went there. And what I would do as a parent, and again, this works in a business setting, is I would say to them, "Oh, wow, how was the cinema?" And I'd see some signs of deception. They might be touching their face or covering their mouth while they're talking. That's a dead giveaway. We don't want to hide the words coming out of our mouth. So our body's doing this if we're unconsciously hiding stuff. So I might say to them, "Oh, did you have any trouble getting to the cinema? There was a big water leak on King Street, and the cars were backed up for hours." Now I know that didn't happen. But I'm saying that to see if they respond with, "Yeah, we saw that, but we went around it." And all of a sudden now you're agreeing to parts of the story that don't exist. So if you're really unsure about someone lying, there's a whole bunch of techniques. And I mean, that one gets a little bit intricate. I know when I was a kid, I didn't tell the truth to my parents all the time. And they dropped that technique on me all the time. They would add information that I'm supposed to know if it happened, but it didn't happen.
But the thing is, it's not actually lying back to the person. It's trying to fish out, you've got information, but you're mixing the information up to see if they can correct you or to see if they're actually, on the right path, isn't it?
That's right. And one of the reasons body language and understanding human conversation, communication is so difficult is that when a person's lying, they're not necessarily being malicious. Some people lie when they don't know something, but they're afraid of admitting they don't know. So some people are just lying to save face. Some people are lying because they think they know the answer, but they're uninformed. Some people are lying outright. They just don't want to tell you the truth. And so understanding what kind of a lie it is also very important, which takes a whole nother direction. If I think you're lying to me because you don't know the information, but maybe I'm your superior and you're afraid of what I'm going to think, that's a different kind of lie. It also comes across differently. It comes across nervous. And so when you're studying lying, especially, or deception, it's very tricky at the beginning because everyone's lying at some point at all times. There's no moment where we're not doing something that's not 100% true. We're acting through our filters. And so maybe something we say is not 100% true, or we don't fully believe it. We will see the same responses on their body as a lie. However, they're not lying.
But it's not really a lie though. It's like overselling themselves, right? It's like the way that they're trying to convince the person that they're actually better than what they actually are. It's a concept of selling in a sense.
Indeed, indeed. And our job as a viewer of body language is to decipher what kind of lie it is or why they might be lying. You know, another thing to do when someone says something that you don't believe is like, is that true? Just say, is that true? And their first initial reaction is, you know, their eyes might shot open. That's fear, you know, like, oh, he got me. Now, I don't know if they're lying or not. I'm genuinely asking, is that true?
Yeah. Or what is the real reason on why you're saying no? Or what's the real reason on why you're saying it that way?
Yes. Yes, indeed. Yeah. I mean, it's a fun topic.
It is. Okay. So we've touched base on liars. Now, in regards to skeptics, let's say we've got a client, right? And it's the same thing as yourself when someone approaches you and you're like, oh, I'm a mentalist, I'm an illusionist. And they're like, oh, okay. You know, sometimes you got the people that go, oh, one of those. And say, you know, what are you trying to trick me? You know, you're a liar, a tricker, right? So it's the same thing in the concept of business, where when you're trying to sell a product or a service, they're like, oh, another coach. Oh, another hairspray. Like those kind of skepticism. How would you personally, and I believe that we can use that in the business sense, like how can we convince them otherwise? Like how can we change that person who is of misbelief or disbelief?
Yeah. So the first thing that came to me when you were saying that, and this is something I use in day to day. This is something I use, you know, as a man. I approach women when I go to, you know, a public setting, and what I know is that because of the female male dynamics, women are approached all the time. So every person that approached is judged straight away. Okay, what's the approach like? How did they walk? Did their voice go up or down when they spoke to me? And we're doing this unconsciously, and somehow the female species are really good at this without trying. You know, I had to study a lot of this stuff, but for some reason, you know, ladies tend to really pick up quickly on this subtle things. So when you approach something or you approach someone, the idea is that you must, instead of telling someone what you want them to know, the best way to do it is to embody it. And if you're going to use words, tell a story about it. Now, if I'm telling a story about my product, instead of saying my product is amazing, this service is wonderful, you're going to get the best results, which I will say at some point in my pitch, what I'd rather do is tell you a story about someone else who got the results that you want to get. And by telling you the story, you can't resist the information coming in because it's not about you. There's nothing to resist. Okay, so the reason I brought up the male-female dynamics, if I'm going to go up to someone that I'm attracted to and I want to speak to them, instead of saying something like, you know, I'm really cool and I've done all of these things.
Oh my God, I had someone say that to me. I went to the gym and I was told that I've got a really good six-pack. It's like, okay, like what the heck?
Now hear this. This is how I would show value in the gym if I was to do the same thing. And this crosses over. If I came up to you in the gym and I saw you and I, you know, waved my hand in front of your eyes and you took out your ear pods, and I'll say, you know, I just needed to tell you this and I couldn't wait. But that is the perfect body. And then if she reacts like, oh, well, thank you, a little bit shocked, I'm like, no, sorry, that was weird, not you. And then I point to myself in the mirror and I say, him, that guy. You know? And so what I've shown is that I'm confident, I'm taking myself seriously. I'm not the typical person that just comes up and gives a random compliment to try and get your attraction. I'm showing you that I understand the social dynamics. I know guys come and say this all the time. That's why I'm going to make it seem that way and then pull it away from you at the last second. It creates a laughter and it creates a bond. It creates attraction even if it's done correctly, but it's got to be done right. And my tone of voice has to be very, very confident for that to work. And so in the business setting, it's the same thing. My product is amazing. My service is wonderful. I was like, you know what? Last year, we helped so many people do this thing. And it was so unexpected because when we started this, and you start talking again about yourself, when we started this, we were really worried that it wasn't going to work for people. And then in my conversation, I will list out all of your resistances. I will talk about your resistances before you say them. Before you have a chance to say it's too expensive, I will say, you know what? Once upon a time, we thought it was too expensive and we didn't want to charge so much for it. So then what we decided to do was add value. And now the results people are getting are so strong. People are actually asking us why we charge so little. So now I've softened your resistance before you've had a chance to resist by telling a story about something else and showing that I understand your position. And I think this is, it's tricky to balance. It takes a lot of improvisation. But if you can negate resistance before they come up, there's a lot less chance of resistance.
It's like you said, like you spot on in terms of that. It's like selling the end result, isn't it? Rather than, this is great, this is amazing, and then it's more of attacking every resistance, as you said, like knowing what resistance.
But resistance is the only one I could think of.
I know, I'm thinking of it too. Yeah, so every resistance or every counter every no's, right? Every reason why they say no, you have to figure out why they want to say no and why they would say no, and kind of attack every single one before they come back at you, isn't it?
That's right. And that's why it comes down to listening. If I ask you, see, I think salesmen, and I've done this myself when I used to, be in retail as well, many years ago when I was young. Salesmen don't know you yet. So a salesman that comes right out of the gate and tries to sell you on something can't possibly sell you, because you might not even need that product or want that product. Now, some salesmen might use manipulation and convince you that you need the product. That's a whole different game. Rather, what I'd like to do is find out what you need, what you want, who you are, and then really figure out, is the product even good for this person? I might even say, you know what? This product may not be good for you based on what you've told me. What happens there? One, I'm not trying to sell you anymore. I'm putting the product over there. It may not be good for you. Two, well, why isn't it good for me? I'm good. And all of a sudden now they want the product and they're selling themselves to me. And so this is a game. This is a game. I'm not trying to manipulate people in this scenario, but if I'm listening really closely, I might just find that these people require something else of me. And if I can deliver that, I will. And I think one of the best things about being in business is that if I can't do it, it's very safe to recommend it to somebody else. There's nothing wrong with doing that. And if you can do that, people have rang me up all the time when I was younger. I paid $6,000 once upon a time when I was living in Sydney 10 years ago, for a Yellow Pages ad, maybe even 12 years ago.
What the hell is a Yellow Pages for those people?
I don't even know if they still exist. I don't think they do. And I paid for the ad, and it was a big ad, and it was on a good page. I paid extra for it. And all I was getting was phone calls for people that wanted to hire a magician for kids' birthdays. And this is not my audience. My audience are adults. My audience are generally corporate clients and, people with a different level of income to compensate what I offer for my show, what I charge for my show. And so I was getting all these calls I just couldn't take. And I didn't want to do the shows because my act doesn't include those tricks. So
it's not PG. No.
Yeah. I don't have a rabbit anymore. The rabbit peed in my hat, so I had to get rid of the rabbit because the hat was more expensive.
I had to murder the rabbit.
And so what would happen is I would, instead of saying I can't do it, but I'd charge this much, you should hire me. My listening was telling me that they don't want what I've got. Is as much as I loved taking the business call, they don't want what I've got. And instead of trying to sell me, I would give them the number for a friend or a colleague that was a kids entertainer who would do it. And I gave it to them. And you know what? Very often, and there's, I didn't count and there's no number, but often enough, hey, Xavier, you gave me the number of so-and-so for this kids party that I had. They were great. Thank you so much. I have this corporate event. We'd love to hire you now. And it came back to me. I didn't sell my show at that point. I, in fact, did the opposite of selling my show. I gave away the work, but I listened to my client. They got what they wanted and they felt heard. And so when they had the opportunity, they called me back.
It's being genuine, isn't it? It's not just selling for the sake of selling and getting money. It's more of what suits that person that you're speaking to. And it's like I had a prospect, and she came to me wanting coaching, but she didn't quite understand the concept of coaching. So at the end of the strategy call, it's not trying to sell her something. It's like, okay, I don't think this is for you, but these are the steps that you can take in your journey somewhere else. So, and it's the same, like, I know of a friend who is in real estate, where she had a client or a prospect where they said that they had a larger offer from someone off the street comparatively to how she would do it. And what she did was she says, that is a better offer, and I think you should take it rather than go through with me as an agent. So it's that genuine act, isn't it, as well? It's not about reading, it's about also serving, and as the word of the day, giving value, because by giving, it always comes back, isn't it? Givers gain, as they say. Yeah.
The coolest sentence that I've heard recently, and it was from a coach that I've been working with, and actually the reason I chose the coach was because of his moral standpoint and his spiritual standpoint rather than his success. He talks a lot about the success that he's created in people in the world and what he's done. But when I was listening to him speak, and he was speaking to the masses, he wasn't speaking to me personally. The way he was talking was that he really genuinely cared about the people he was helping. And he came from a place of, I want to do this for the greater good. And over time, listening to him, I realized he meant it. He said it so often, and he really lived it. And one of his sentences that he would say all the time was, everyone wants to be a go-getter. But why don't we turn it around and become a go-giver? And just give. Now, the value that he provides is so vast, you want to work with him. He does sell. He does do a pitch every time he talks. And when you listen to a podcast or any interview that he's done, he does sell his program, but he doesn't force you to. He's given so much value. I wanted to find out what was in his program. I was like, if this is for free, what is he giving me for money?
Yeah.
The hard sell happens on its own. You sell yourself at that point.
Yeah. So we've talked about body language. We've talked about the concept of hand gestures to convince someone in a way. We've talked about how we listen, we communicate. Now, the next thing is more about language, isn't it? Like how well do we understand language? Because every country is different too. Like I'm originally from Malaysia, and when I'm in Malaysia, I speak the way the locals would speak because I want them to be able to understand the message that I'm trying to portray. Even though it's English, it's the Manglish, as they say, of the locals, and it's the same, like, in Australia, the way that Australians communicate to the way that people from different countries communicate is understanding the local way of communicating in order to sell, in order to pitch, in order to connect with. So it's not just speaking, but it's also understanding that culture in order to, do business as well as selling, isn't it? Now, because you're such a traveler, are there any similarities or differences that you've noticed through your travels?
Yeah, except are you talking in reference to language as such, or
like when you're trying to do your tricks, like whatever illusions and stuff like that? Are there certain words that you have to change when you speak to different people?
Yeah, so I spent 5 years living in Helsinki in Finland, and they speak Finnish there, and it's notoriously hard language. And I mean, I was committed to learning it for about 3 weeks. And then I realized everyone just prefers to speak to me in English because they want to practice English.
Right.
So I just avoided learning Finnish. But what I did have to do was change my English. And that means remove words we don't need. Remove slang. Shorten sentences. It actually helped me to be much more succinct with my language, be able to deliver information sharper and clearer and in a shorter time span. It also helped in my act. It made my show much shorter. I could fit in more in my show because I had less dialogue. And the thing that stood out was how I spoke. So I started to pronounce my letter R more like an American R. So like four.
Or
Where in Australia, we just drop it off and put an AH, like four. It's like
yes.
back
Yeah.
here somewhere. So I thought that I had to change my language to suit my audience. And I think I even overdid it. So I was doing it too much. My English sounded quite strange, actually. It didn't sound Australian anymore until I came back home for a visit, recharged my accent and went back with it. I was speaking more naturally again, and I realized people still understood me. So when it comes to language, especially when it's cross culture, if you're speaking English, for example, be aware that there's words you don't need to use. There's turns of phrase that are unnecessary. You can simplify language. It doesn't have to be so simple that it sounds like you're talking to a child. But again, if you were talking to a child, you would use simple language. So
Simpler.
It is definitely a model. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So people say, I want to be a speaker, I want to be a coach, and they have like a strong, let's say an Asian accent or a strong Australian accent. Now, I've had a lot of comments where people are like, oh, you have an American accent, even though I'm not American. And because I'm from Southeast Asia, it's like, how come you don't have an Asian accent? The way that I saw things, and the thing is, I'm not sure if you know about this, but I used to be an extreme introvert and a stutterer. Oh, yes, you do. Yes, you do. I remember this.
Okay. Oh, yes, I can see it now.
So like I needed to change the way that I spoke coming from Southeast Asia. So I needed to find a language which is acceptable by people globally. So I would listen back to the way that I spoke, and I would change the way that I sounded. Maybe it's too much, American shows. I don't know. But I know Australian, the slang is very, very, I don't know, what's the word? It's thick. It's so thick that my first year in Australia was really difficult for me to understand. It's not that I don't understand English. It's that the slang was just so thick for me. So I didn't really want to adopt that Australian accent because of that. Like I found a lot of foreigners find it difficult understanding the Australian English. So I found a neutral, and it sounds American, I found a neutral ground where I could be understood by people globally, where...
Unless you're saying mirroring.
Yeah, or psychological. Yeah. So it's that whole process. Like we have to eliminate, unfortunately, we have to eliminate those kind of slang or accents, isn't it? So that it depends on the kind of audience that we want to touch base with. But that is how... Unfortunately, that's how the world is. So if you have an Asian accent, you got to kill it, unfortunately, isn't it?
It depends. You can use it to your advantage if you want people to know where you're from. But if it's a strong accent, it's in your best interest to do something about it. And I'll say this because this is a story that actually began my path on becoming a clearer speaker. A lot of the time in the world, people say, but you don't sound Australian, or they'll think maybe I'm English because they can understand all my words, which is weird because I don't always understand everything an Englishman says because they also have a thick accent from time to time. But I was in Bali, one of my first ever vacations when I was in my teens or early 20s. And there was this young Australian man, and he was arguing with a local, and I could hear the way he was speaking to her was like he was speaking to a bunch of blokes at the pub, and I could tell that his Australian English was so
Australian.
Yeah, Australian English. It was so wild and all over the place. And what I recognized in the interaction, because he was arguing with a local lady, she was arguing back with him, and he was getting mad at her for not understanding him. And what I very quickly realized was he's at fault. This is her country. This is her second language. It's on us to modify to the listener. And then I realized I had to turn the game inwards. I had to stop trying to convince people or make people understand me, but rather make myself understandable.
And is that concept, and that concept of selling too, like if they don't get it, like say something in a different way, isn't it? It's saying it in a different sentence, but saying it like saying that same information but in a different sentence, because they could have understood it in that way rather than the original way you have in your mind.
Yes. So one way to do that, I ask you if you understood what I said. I might use a different phrase to ask you that, but I'll ask you if you understood what I said, and can you just let me know what you understood, so I'm sure that you understood it. And they will repeat it to you, and you'll hear in their description. And of course, take into consideration they may not describe it very well, but based on the key points, did they get what I was offering? I'll say, oh, that was almost correct. Let me rephrase that. Don't you change the way you're thinking. You're receiving information this way. It's my duty to see how you receive the information and then alter my communication. And by putting that responsibility this way, actually it opens all the doors, because I don't need anyone to change to communicate to them, because I'm doing the changing. And that is actually a powerful position. It's really annoying at the beginning. I was like, why is it always me doing the work? But now I can answer that question by saying it's absolutely worth it. Worth it. I'm getting better every day at communicating.
Only if you're directing into one set of audience, which is maybe if it's just Australians, then you talk the same way, you know. If you're only directing to the Asians, then you talk exactly the same. But if you're a kind of person that wants to go international, then that's the thing. You need to be able to understand that culture and the language. Maybe not so their local language, but more of like phrases, right? Because then it shows that you're putting effort into them as a person, that you invested into them, right?
Yeah. I asked someone to do a pinky promise, and they said back to me, okay, pinky swear. And I was like, oh, I guess this person calls it a pinky swear.
Yeah.
Now, if I kept calling it pinky promise, it's fine. They'll understand me. I'll understand them. But why can't I, for this one person, call it a pinky swear? And then they can hear their language reflected back. That gets me closer. It gives me a position to be a communicative, not even an authority, but a communicative partner. You know, they're listening to me. They're using my language. They don't know this consciously, but people really are good at picking up on stuff. We are very intuitive as humans.
Man, we could go all day, isn't it? This is like quite interesting in terms of all these things.
I love this. This is the first podcast that I've been able to share this information. A lot of times people are asking me really direct stuff about performing and you know what it is to do this, and maybe show me this, and this has been wonderful. This is my pet. All this communication stuff, body language. I'm in love with this topic.
Amazing, cool. Yeah, no, I love what you do, and I can see like the first time I met you and the second time I met you and all the other times too. It's like the way that you're so, you know, perceptive in terms of people that you communicate with, and it's not in a stockish way. Like it's just genuinely, you know what I mean? Like I'm not just staring at you for the sake of staring at you. Like I'm reading you, but I'm reading you because I want to understand. I want to be able to communicate with you. I want to be able to interact with you where you understand. And it's the same thing as a business person. When you're trying to sell, it's trying to understand your prospect, your client in terms of how you can help them, how you can give them that value, how you can amaze them into heading towards the goals that they want to, you know, achieve in their business life or in their personal life, isn't it?
Yes, it really is. And again, you know, and this becomes clearer and clearer. I've understood this for a while, but I haven't put it into practice as much as I have today. And that is listening for your, I'm going to call them a subject. So whoever's in front of you, listening for your client, your subject's values, listening for their beliefs, listening for their fears and their desires, but listening from a place not like I'm listening to you so that I can use that to sell you, but really listening to find out who this person is. And once you do that, you can talk to them in a way that is much more free and relaxed. And again, the selling happens by itself. Because I know you, because we're friends now, because we have this connection and rapport, I have this thing here, which I believe in fully. And I don't have to sell it to you, but I think this would be wonderful for you. And I'd love that for you. And if you can really mean that, again, sales will go up. If I'm using my understanding of language to specifically just sell you, 2 days after you purchase, you're going to feel bad about it because you've been convinced. We don't want to convince people. We want them to sell themselves so that we don't have to do the work.
What is your ultimate tip for a business person towards success or towards sales?
Ooh, towards success. I think my one underlying facet that's been with me a very long time is gathering and learning new information and practicing that stuff. Really practicing.
I'm so glad you said the word practice.
Good. I'm glad.
That is the key. Like the key is not just knowledge. The key is actually practicing what you learn. It's like we don't want to be professional students. We want to be professional go-getters, isn't it? We want to be professional actors? No, professional doers.
Doers, yeah, achievers, yeah. If you look, one, I love learning and I love reading information. I still do it. In fact, because of the direction that I had to take during the pandemic, I couldn't do any shows. So I just accepted that I couldn't do any work. There was no business for me. I sat and I started reading, and I started reading all the old psychological books that I had, the mentalism books that I had, body language books. I read them again. I just started ingesting information. And when it was time and the moment arose where I could do an online show, I had a whole new tool belt available to me. And it happened because I kept learning. I didn't say, well, I'm a great entertainer, I'm a great magician, I'm just going to wait till the COVID goes away. I did that at the beginning, but then I realized that wasn't going to work. So what can I do in the meantime when there's no work? I can learn more. But I had to put that into action later, because otherwise it was just a bunch of learning.
But it's that concept of leveling up, isn't it?
Got to level up. Got to level up. I'm currently in the process of redefining myself as a human and as an entertainer. For many years, I've got this over here. For many years, I was wearing, it's upside down. I was wearing a form,
Yeah.
I used to wear steampunk. My top hat used to have goggles on it. It was a cool, grungy look. And then I started to wear a nice suit with a nice jacket, but I still kept the hat. Instead of having the goggles, I just put 3 cards here and a feather. And I made it, like I stood out in the crowd. And, I was committed to that being my character. And I had to wear the hat when I was on stage and when I took videos and photos. And even now, I had to look at myself and say, well, what am I using in my life that doesn't serve me anymore? What served me already, and what can I get rid of? And that was the work that I'm doing currently. I'm redesigning my look. I'm redesigning my brand, because I don't want to stop leveling up. I think I hit a level that was for me, was successful. I stopped trying and I lost motivation. And the success also started slowly dipping as well, because there was nothing fresh, nothing new. And so I have no problem with trying to change everything in my life if I have.
It's not really changing though, it's redirecting it in a way, because you didn't completely lose that. It's you using it in a different way. You're changing it where it suits your current pivoting experience.
Pivoting. That's the word. I like that one. Yeah. I had to pivot.
Absolutely.
I stopped calling myself a magician. Again, because I knew that I was putting myself in a box by using that title, and it no longer served what I was doing. I wasn't doing just magic anymore. I was getting inside people's minds. I was creating imaginary scenarios. I was plucking ideas and thoughts from them. It was magic of another level, and I didn't feel like magician fit. Even mentalist is great. It's a much broader topic. But again, there may be a day where that doesn't fit in, that doesn't fit the box that I'm in anymore. And I've either got to change the title or remove the title altogether. Once people know my name, maybe I don't need a title anymore.
Nice chat, Xavier. I could have you all day. Let us keep people's curiosity at hand. Now, I am going to put in the title of the books that Xavier has recommended on the description. So those of you that are interested, you may look at it and maybe purchase it. And also, I'm going to put a link towards Xavier's social media platforms. So do follow him, like him, and tell us how you thought of this episode with Xavier today. But otherwise, if you do like this, please do like it, share it, and comment. Until next time, I'll see you on the next show on the Solo to Entrepreneur. Thank you, Xavier, for coming on board to today's episode.
Thank you, Lorraine. It's been a pleasure.